Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu wa sallam wa barak. Ala Nabina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. طيب, I apologize for the technical difficulties, but now we'll begin our seminar, which we've entitled Provisions for the Fast of Ramadan. And the program, the outline for the 2 days or the coming 2 days is there on the PowerPoint. And we do have some handouts that are in the process of being copied, so you can actually have something in your hand to follow along with. But we thought in the interim, if we were to put it here, that would be helpful. Now, as you can see, the program begins with an introduction. Today, we'll be doing an introduction. Basically, what we're going to be dealing with today are more like the ritual and practical side of fasting. And we'll begin with an introduction. We'll talk about the meaning of fasting, ta'rif as-siyam, lughatan wa istilahan. We're talking about the linguistic and the Islamic meaning of fasting. We'll be talking about the virtues of fasting, the virtues of Ramadan. We'll be talking about the conditions for the acceptability of fasting, the conditions for its obligation, some of the sunan, some of the encouraged acts which we should observe while fasting, as well as some of the makruhat, some of the discouraged practices that can decrease the reward for fasting as well. Then after that, we will be taking a in-depth look and studying in detail the Kitab al-Siyam, the book of fasting, from the book Bulugh al-Maram by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. We also have copies of that text, or at least the ahadith that we'll be studying, in the process of being copied as well. So that's what we'll be looking at today, inshallah ta'ala. Before beginning with this introduction, I want to give an introduction to the introduction and to speak briefly about the method or the approach that we should take when studying al-ahkam, when studying the rules and regulations, the do's and don'ts of Islam. And it's important that we have some guidelines and a framework within which we operate when we study the ahkam. Because if you don't, you'll find yourself all over the place. And you'll find yourself being a person who determines what is right and wrong most often by what feels good, what makes sense to you in terms of some of the subjective factors that make up your line of thinking. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the conclusions that you will draw will be correct. And the whole reason that we should go to these sources of Islam and try to study and determine what is correct, or determine what we will do, is because we want to do the right thing, not the thing that feels good. And it's not always necessarily necessary that the thing that feels good is the thing that is right. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala qad ashara ila hadha. Allah pointed to this in the Qur'an when He said, عَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. He said, it's possible that you dislike a thing and it's better for you, it's good for you. And it's possible that you hate something, you dislike something, and it is good. It's possible that you dislike something and it's good for you. And it's possible that you like something and it's bad for you. So we can't always go by what feels good. We have to go by what's right. And how can we determine what's right? There has to be what? A method. There has to be a method. And so we want to talk briefly about that method, or some important points related to that method. The first point I want to mention is al-ilmu ma ja'a min Allah an tariqi Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa naqalahu ashabuhu ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim. Knowledge is that which has come from Allah by way of the Messenger of Allah, and has been transmitted to us by the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and may Allah be pleased with them. So what this means is that knowledge, when we talk about it from an Islamic perspective, is the Qur'an and the Sunnah. These are the fundamental primary sources of knowledge, because they come from Allah by way of what? Rasulullah. This is knowledge. As Al-Awza'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he used to say, Al-ilmu ma ja'a عن أصحاب محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وما لم يجئ عن واحد منهم فليس بعلم. Al-Awza'i used to say, knowledge is that which has reached us by way of the companions of Muhammad. And whatever has not reached us by way of any one of them, then is not knowledge. And so this is critical for us to understand that when we're looking for sources of knowledge and how we're going to determine right from wrong, where we're going to extract the ahkam, the rules and regulations, we should be turning to three primary sources, or two primary sources, the Qur'an and the Hadith, or the Qur'an and the Sunnah. And regarding the Sunnah, I want to make another point. As mentioned by Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala and Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, that the Sunnah is not just what the Prophet did or what the Prophet said. It's also the things that he didn't do, that he abandoned purposefully, intentionally. As Ibn al-Qayyim, he said, ما فعله النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ففعله سنة وما تركه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فتركه سنة. He said, whatever the Prophet did, then doing it is sunnah. And whatever the Prophet abandoned, intentionally abandoned from the acts of worship, then leaving it off is also sunnah. And what that teaches you is that doing an act of worship which the Prophet intentionally didn't do would become then bid'ah. It would be what? An innovation, something which we're not encouraged. In fact, we're prohibited from doing. The second point related to studying ahkam is لا بد من اعتبار فهم الصحابة والانقياد له. That the person who's going to study the ahkam, study the Qur'an and Sunnah to derive the ahkam, he has to give due credence to the understanding of the companions in terms of what? The Qur'an and the Hadith. How they understood it should be very weighty and have great weight in the process that he follows in coming to a conclusion about what is right and what is wrong. And he should never dismiss their understanding. Why? Because they are the ones who walked with Rasulullah. They are the ones who witnessed the revelation. They were the ones who lived in the context of its revelation, and so they best understand what Allah intended and what the Prophet intended. And that's why Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said in his book Iqtida as-Sirat al-Mustaqim, he said, إنما المتبع في إثبات أحكام الله هو كتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وسبيل السابقين أو الأولين ولا يجوز إثبات حكم شرعي بدون هذه الأصول الثلاثة نصا ولا استنباطا بحال. He said, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, what must be followed exclusively when a person wants to confirm a ruling of Allah is the book of Allah, the sunnah of His Messenger, and the path, the understanding, the interpretation of as-sabiqeen wal awwaleen, of what? The first and foremost, the forerunners of Islam, meaning what? Ashab Rasulullah. And he said it's not permissible for a person to confirm a ruling and say, hey, this is the deen, this is what you're supposed to do. You have to do this, you should do that, you can't do that, and call it from the deen. It's not permissible to do that unless he does what? He returns to these three what? These three pillars of understanding. Whether he's doing that saying my proof is a text, or what? My extracting meaning from the text, regardless of that, he can't come to a conclusion without turning to these three sources, bihal, under any circumstances. So we have to look at how they understood these texts. We can't just say the Quran says this, the Hadith says this, and I understand from it this, so this is what it is. We have to do what? See how they understood it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this in many places in the Quran. In one place in the Quran, very, very explicit. He says, فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا. He says, speaking to what? Muhammad and his companions. He says, if they believe, meaning the people who come after you, the way you believe, then they are rightly guided. The scholars of Islam said the wording of the verse indicates that the opposite meaning is also intended. If they don't believe the way you believe, if they don't understand the deen the way you understand it, then what? Then they've gone astray. طيب, the third point I want to mention, لا بد من تقديم قول السلف وفهمهم على قول الخلف وفهمهم. That sometimes what happens, ya ikhwani wa akhawat, when we study these masail, when we study these issues, we find that the scholars of the past, the early Muslims, from the companions and those who followed them, we find that they held an opinion or a group of opinions. They may be different, but their opinions are what? Mahsura, they're confined to what? 2, 3, 4 opinions. And then we'll find that what? The contemporaries, those who came after them, those who, for example, live in our time or pretty close to our time, they may have an opinion which is what? Additional to these opinions held by what? The early Muslims. Or they may differ with the opinions of the early Muslims. And that will put us fi what? Fi hayra, we'll be a little bit confused. Okay, well, who should we follow? Who should we go with? We have to understand that we always have to tip the scales in the direction of the early Muslims. Because their understanding is what? Is pure. And they're closer to the what? To the source. And we always have to give precedence to what? The early Muslims. And the Prophet alluded to this in the hadith when he said, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ. He said, the best of people is my generation, these companions. And then those who follow them, meaning the successors, at-tabi'in. And then those who follow them, atba' at-tabi'in, the successors to the successors. They're the best. They understand the deen the best. They practice it the best. And so we can't give precedence to what? To that which is inferior over that which is superior. We have to give precedence to what? The early Muslims. So if you have a situation where the contemporaries are saying one thing, the early Muslims are saying something else, we have to give precedence to what? To the early Muslims. Another point, من حرم الأصول حرم الوصول. Al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala has a famous quote, a famous statement, and it's basically a maxim. It's a principle of the religion. من حرم الأصول من حرم الأصول حرم الوصول. Whoever was deprived of those fundamental principles which are considered the foundation of the deen, the principles upon which this deen is based, whoever doesn't have that, doesn't get that, doesn't follow that, حرم الوصول, then he won't reach his what? His objective. He wants to find out the right thing. He wants to do the right thing. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for joining us, Musa. He wants to do the right thing. He wants to come to the right conclusion. But he won't be able to do that if he doesn't have what? If he doesn't follow the right method. And the method lies in what? In these fundamental principles that govern the deen. If you have these principles, then what? It's almost like a flow chart. And a lot of engineers in the room, you guys know about these flow charts, that they help us to what? To reach the right what? Conclusion. Same thing with these usul. The usul what? Point us and guide us through our study of the Quran and Hadith to what? To reach the right conclusion. If you don't have that, then what? You'll go the wrong direction and you'll miss what? You'll miss out on what you were trying to what? What you were seeking, what you were questing after. So this is critical. And I'll give you an example of these usul. I'll give you an example. One example is al-asl fil ibadat, and this is going to be useful in our study. Al-asl fi ghayr al-ibadat al-hill wal-ibaha. Wal-aslu fil ibadat al-manu wal-hadar. That when it comes to things which have nothing to do with religion, they're things which have everything to do with what? Our daily lives, but nothing to do with religion. The original rule in the deen is that they are what? Permissible. And when it comes to things that have to do with the deen, with ibadah, the way we're going to worship Allah, then the asl in those things is what? Is that they are prohibited. So what that means is that when it comes to daily life, and I ask myself, can I do this? Is this okay to do this? The asl is what? The original rule is I can do it. Until what? Proof is presented that the deen has what? Has disallowed it. But when it comes to the deen, the opposite is true. That I can't do anything which I call ibadah, in which I hope to get a reward from Allah. I can't do that unless what? Unless I can what? Produce proof that it's what? it's acceptable, it's allowable. You guys understand that? Does it make sense? Okay. So for example, let's say that we have a question about swimming. Swimming in Ramadan while you're fasting. Okay? Swimming in Ramadan while you're fasting. Is it an act of worship for which you seek to be rewarded? Or is it just something what? A worldly act that you seek to do? Which one is it? What do you say? Let me see a show of hands, worldly. Anybody say it's a religious act? Anybody for religious act? Religious act. Ajib. No, he's just. Oh, it's a religious act. Why is it a religious act?
Depends on your niyyah. If you were doing it because it's one of the prescribed things, like swimming, it's a good thing for a Muslim to learn. With that intention, it could become a religious act.
Okay, I guess, that's a good point. Obviously, the niyyah will make anything. It could potentially make anything an act of worship. Okay, but let's say a person did it because they just like to swim. So now we know what their niyyah is. Would that be a religious act? طيب, even if we use the qa'idah, what's the ruling, without looking at the text, what's the original ruling for swimming while one is fasting in Ramadan? What would be the original rule? The original ruling for it? Would it be allowed or disallowed? It would be what? Allowed. Because it's what? A non-religious act. And the one who says, no, you can't swim in Ramadan, haram, then what? The burden of proof would be on him. Why? Because al-asl fi ghayri ibadat al-hillu wal-ibaha. The original rule when it comes, and this is isn't that useful? Isn't that useful? So you go to anything in life and you can divide into what? This side or that side. If I put it on this side, if I put it on the religious side, I know that what? Someone has to prove it's haram. The non-religious side, someone has to prove it's haram. If I put it on the other side, the religious side, someone has to prove it's halal. Give you another example. طيب. This one's going to be a little bit tricky, but we'll just see who the sharp people are, right? طيب. You guys know that the Prophet ﷺ, when he traveled, he used to shorten and combine the prayers. Is that not so? Everybody with me so far? Okay, perfect. Now, did he shorten and combine all of the prayers? So, for example, did he shorten Fajr? Abadan. Did he combine Fajr and Dhuhr? Abadan. So he had a guidance when it came to what? Shortening and combining. Wallah? طيب. So when it came to Fajr, there was no shortening and no combining. Dhuhr and Asr, he shortened them and combined them with each other. So he didn't combine Asr with Maghrib. Asr can only be combined with Dhuhr. Mumtaz. طيب, Al-Maghrib, did he shorten it? No, but he would combine it with Isha, which he would shorten. Would he combine Salat al-Isha with Fajr? Abadan. So he had specific guidance when it came to combining and shortening. You guys with me so far? Mumtaz. But suppose someone says that they're going to travel on the day of Jumu'ah. And so they'll pray Salat al-Jumu'ah, ma'al jama'ah, with the congregation. And then afterwards they'll pray Salat al-Asr. They'll combine it so they can drive or travel until Salat al-Maghrib. With me? طيب, يجوز or ما يجوز? Is it permissible or not permissible? Using the qa'idah. Using just the qa'idah.
So they're leaving from their home, having made Jumu'ah, trying to make sure it's clear.
See how some people try to wiggle the answer out of the teacher? Okay, let's say it again. They come to the masjid, Salim, and they're going to pray Salat al-Jumu'ah with al-Jama'ah, with the rest of the congregation. With me? All right, okay. As soon as they finish al-Jum'ah, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. They finish the Jum'ah, Salat al-Jum'ah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Shadu an la ilaha illallah. They get up to do Salat al-Asr. They're going to combine Salat al-Asr and Salat al-Jumu'ah. Because the Prophet what? Combined between Dhuhr and Asr. Okay? So if you Jews or you Jews? Huh? Permissible or not permissible? Permissible, he says. Mumtaz. طيب, anybody else in the permissible group? Let me see a show of hands. Permissible. Let me see the show of hands for not permissible. Not permissible. أحسنتم. طيب, let's go back to the قاعدة. الأصل في العبادات. الأصل في العبادات, the original rule when it comes to ibadah is what? الحرمة والحظر. It's absolutely what? Prohibited. Can't do anything that you seek to get thawab Allah. You seek to get what? A reward from Allah, except that you have what? Proof, evidence. طيب, where's the proof for combining al-Jumu'ah and al-Asr? I'm waiting. طيب, قد يقال, a person could say al-Qiyas. They could say analogy. We make an analogy. We say that the Prophet combined between Dhuhr and Asr, so we should be to combine between Jumu'ah and Asr. We say this is problematic. There's a problem with this from a number of angles. One, al-Qiyas fasid. This Qiyas, this analogy is what? It's unacceptable. Why? Because we can't make an analogy between two different things. Al-Jumu'ah and al-Dhuhr they're not the same. So how can you make an analogy? The fundamental principle of al-Qiyas, analogy, is that you have to make an analogy between two things which are what? The same or similar. One of them has a ruling from the Sharia, the other doesn't have a ruling. Al-Jumu'ah and al-Dhuhr, they're the same? La. Al-Jumu'ah, rak'atain, 2 units. Dhuhr, 4. Al-Jumu'ah is what? Is said aloud. Al-Dhuhr, silent. Al-Jumu'ah, I mean, you could say, according to some of the madhahib, it has no waqt. Has no what? Time. Al-Dhuhr has what? A time. And we can go on and on and on. In fact, Ibn al-Qayyim mentioned about 30 differences between al-Jumu'ah and al-Dhuhr in his book Zad al-Ma'ad. So this principle, ya ikhwani wa akhawati, is what? It's very beneficial. And this is just one principle of the many principles that we can use in the deen to determine what? To determine the right hukm, the right ruling. Useful principles. And I just wanted to mention this so you can get a taste of the importance of what, as the Shafi'i said, Man hurima al-usul, hurima al-wusul. Person who didn't follow this principle, what? Wound up what? In the wrong valley. And said what? Jaiz. Allah knows best. Could be difference of opinion. But again, another thing that strengthens the opinion that we just said is what? Al-ihtiyat. That we what? We err on the side of what? Caution and the acceptance of our deeds. Also, we don't have a precedent. We don't have a precedent from who? From Rasulullah or from his companions. And we said earlier that what? مَا فَعْلَهُ النَّبِيُّ فَفِعْلُهُ sunnah. Whatever the Prophet did, then doing it is what? Sunnah. وَمَا تَرَكَهُ النَّبِيُّ فَتَرْكَهُ sunnah. Whatever the Prophet didn't do, leaving it is what? Not doing it is sunnah. Okay? And we don't have any example where the Prophet or his companions combined between what? Al-Jumu'ah and what? Al-Asr. Mumtaz? طيب. Let me give you one last qa'idah, and then we're going to hit the ground running because now I have the handouts now, don't I? Okay. Just let me make sure I get the original. Jazakallah khair. And I don't need the Bulugh al-Maram. I have the text. But I just need the outline. طيب. So we have one more principle, I think. And I'm glad that just happened too. Because this is important for the principle I'm going to mention. When we mentioned this issue of Dhuhr and Asr, Jumu'ah and Asr, we differed. Some people said it's perfectly permissible. And some people said it's not permissible. The last principle I want to mention is related to this, and I'm glad this happened. It's what لا بد من اتساع الصدر للخلاف المعتبر. لا بد من اتساع الصدر للخلاف المعتبر. Our hearts have to be open, يا إخواني وأخواتي, for valid, genuine, acceptable differences of opinion. And this is a big problem in the Muslim Ummah today, that you find that people's hearts are very what? Closed. Their minds are closed. And they demonstrate a great deal of intolerance. Somebody says something that they don't agree with, even though the scholars throughout the history of Islam have disagreed on this issue. You'll find them what? You'll find them having enmity. You'll find them having hatred. You might even find them becoming physically aggressive, boycotting the person who doesn't agree with them in an issue where the scholars of Islam previously differed and had no what? And had no issues with each other regarding what? These differences. Their hearts were what? Open to the concept of what? Khilaf. The issues that they had were with the people who took the wrong what? Path. So even if they came to the right conclusion, they followed the wrong path, the scholars what? They didn't like this. They didn't like a person who used ra'i, who used what? Intellect, who used deductive reasoning when there's what? A hadith. Even if he came to the right conclusion, they didn't like that. But if the person used the hadith, used the usul, but came to the wrong conclusion, they what? They were able to what? To accept that. To the point that the Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he used to say, وَأَرْجُوا أَن تَنْتَبِهُوا إِلَى هَذِهِ الْمَقُولَةِ. I hope you will pay attention to the statement of a Shafi'i because it's what? عظيمة. He said, قَوْلُ خَصْمِ خَطَأٌ يَحْتَمِلُ الصَّوَابِ وَقَوْلِ صَوَابٌ يَحْتَمِلُ الْخَطَأ. He used to say, my opinion is the right opinion, but it could be wrong. And the opinion of my opponent is the wrong opinion, but it could be right. And so if my opponent has an opinion which I don't share, I'm willing to what? Sit with him. I'm willing to have dialogue with him. And if he's able to convince me, I'm even willing to what? To convert to his viewpoint. And if he can't convince me and I'm not able to convince him, I'm able to what? To agree, to disagree, provided that the issue is one of those issues in which differing is permitted. So this is critical because why? When we start to study fiqh, this is the reality of fiqh. We're not going to agree. The scholars of Islam didn't agree. The Sahaba on some issues, few in number, they didn't agree. And so if the best of people didn't agree, how are the people who are far from their level, how are they going to agree on everything? They won't. So our hearts have to be open to the fact that I may say something that you've heard something different. And you can't just tune out. Oh, that's not what the Shaykh told me 2 years ago. It's wrong. And you just don't listen because maybe you'll learn something today about this issue that will make you see that perhaps what you learned before was not correct. Or at the very least, you'll learn what other people have said, their viewpoint, and that will broaden your horizons, and you'll be able to what? To interact with people and understand that this is a what? A legitimate, acceptable difference of opinion, and so I shouldn't what? Be too hard, too harsh or intolerant toward what? The one who holds it. Does that make sense, ya ikhwani wa akhawat? Does that make sense? This is critical for the Muslims. We are in bad shape. And one of the reasons we're in bad shape is because of our intolerance. We become intolerant people, whereas the early Muslims were not intolerant. You had people who were able to force others to accept their opinion, and they wouldn't do that. Umar al-Khattab used to do what? Used to permit the companions from differing with him, although he was able as a Khalifa to what? To force them to what? Accept his viewpoint. طيب, with that said, those are the points I wanted to mention before we begin following the outline. And do the sisters have the outline? Have they been given the papers? All right, so we'll wait for that to happen and then we'll get after it. You don't have to give them anything. They don't deserve anything. Don't give men anything. Just give it to the sisters, you share. طيب. لا إله إلا الله. All right. We'll start as those are being passed out. Can the sisters see, by the way? Is this too far away? I guess it doesn't matter now. You guys are going to get the papers. Okay, خلاص. طيب, let's start with our agenda, with the introduction. And the first matter on the docket is تعريف الصيام لغة واصطلاحا, or لغة, I should say لغة وشرعا. Defining fasting in the language or linguistically and legally. طيب, الصيام or الصوم في لغة العرب مطلق الإمساك. مطلق الإمساك. Fasting in the language of the Arabs means refraining, abstaining, withholding, in general. And so what that means is that in the language of the Arabs, fasting can be from anything. In the language of the Arabs, fasting can be from anything. Anything you refrain from, and you force yourself, or you deprive yourself, you deny yourself of something, then you are fasting. Bidalil, what's the proof? The proof we find in Surah Maryam, verse number 26. Verse number 26, in which we read that the angel, he told her, فَكُلِي وَاشْرَبِي وَقَرِّ عَيْنًا فَإِمَّا تَرَيِنَّ مِنَ الْبَشَرِ أَحَدًا فَقُولِي إِنِّي نَظَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. And this ayah, the angel, he says to, and I want you to pay attention so you can tell me, how do we understand from this ayah that fasting in the language is just what? Absence, abstaining, refraining from something no matter what it is. طيب. The ayah says, so eat and drink and rejoice. Don't feel sad. And if you come across any human being today, then say to that person, I have certainly vowed a fast for the most merciful, or to the most merciful, and I shall not speak to any person this day. Tell me how this verse shows, and please raise your hand, don't just blurt it out. Tell me how this verse shows that fasting in the language of the Arabs is not confined to anything specific, but anytime you refrain from anything, you are fasting. تفضل يا شيخ. وعليكم السلام. سلام. تفضل. Okay. Okay, the brother said that in the end of the ayah, she was told, tell the person, I am fasting to Ar-Rahman today, and so I will not speak to anyone. So that's part of it. That's definitely part of it. That's half of the answer. Because it's as if she's saying my fast is a fast from what? From speaking. Okay? So that indicates that what? She considered fasting from speaking what? A type of what? Fasting. But that's only half of it. Jazakallah khair. You did good. You did good. Now let's see if somebody can come and complete the other half. Musa.
At the beginning of the ayah, he told her to eat and drink.
Ahsant. That fasting is not what? From food and drink only in the language. Why? Because he told her to what? To eat and drink. Ahsant, Musa. So you two guys tag team on that. I wish I had some candy to give out something because you guys deserve a prize for that. Yes. All right. Tayyib. So he told her at the beginning, فَكُلِي وَاشْرَبِي. Eat and drink. Then he told her what? Tell them you're fasting. So that shows that what? Fasting is not what? Specifically from what? Food and drink. But it's what? In the language, it's what? Anything you refrain from, you're considered to be fasting, including what if you refrain from speaking. واضح يا اخوان واخوات؟ طيب ممتاز. طيب ثم بعد ذلك شرعا in the language of the Sharia, legally speaking, what is fasting? هو إمساك مخصوص. It's a specific type of abstinence, a specific type of refraining, right? وهو التعبد لله بالإمساك من المفطرات عن جميع المفطرات من طلوع الفجر إلى غروب الشمس. So it is الإمساك التعبد لله. Yes sir. Yes sir.
Even when someone talks, can we play?
If somebody talks, can you play? Where are you going to play? Where are you going to play?
I was trying to play to kill someone, but they were playing free tag.
Are they playing it
They're
downstairs?
playing without me.
They're playing it downstairs?
They're playing without me.
But are they playing it downstairs? Okay, you can play downstairs, okay? He's fine. He's totally fine. He's totally fine. He is totally fine. MashaAllah. طيب. طيب. So let me collect my thoughts. So we were talking about fasting in the Sharia. Okay. هو تعبد لله بإمساك مخصوص وهو إمساك عن جميع المفطرات من طلوع الفجر إلى غروب الشمس. So basically, fasting is worshiping Allah by carrying out a specific type of abstinence, by refraining from specific things. What are those specific things? Anything and everything which can break the fast, from dawn until dusk. That's fasting. So if you notice that the definition has some pillars to it. The first one, at-ta'abbud lillah. It's worship of Allah, which means you have to have that what? That intention in order for it to be fasting. You guys get that? So that's a critical part of fasting is what? You have to do it with what? The intention of worshiping Allah. Otherwise you won't be fasting. You'll just be starving yourself. So let's imagine a person who woke up early in the morning to go to work before dawn. He was hungry, so he ate something. Went to work and prayed, Salat al-Fajr. After that, immediately what? Started working, worked all day, came home tired, went to sleep, woke up just before Maghrib. Just before Maghrib. And then the adhan for Maghrib sounds, and he's like, man, I'm starving. He has something to eat, and he says, man, I didn't eat anything all day. I was fasting. No, he wasn't fasting, was he? Because he didn't have what? A niyyah. It just happened. It just so happened that he didn't what? He didn't eat anything or drink anything for what? The whole day. But he never had what? The intention. Guys see that? So you have to have the intention. The first one, ta'abbud lillah bi-imsak makhsus, by a specific type of what? With withholding or refraining or abstinence, which means what? That fasting in Islam is not just any type of abstinence. So I can't say, well, you know what? I'm going to fast from grapes. I'm going to fast from talking. I'm going to fast from arguing. I'm going to fast from Xbox, right? And we think that that's what? Fasting in Islam. Like they do in some other religious traditions, they'll have what? A specific fast from a specific thing. So they'll say, okay, there's a particular season where they encourage you to what? Fast. But they don't want to fast the way the Muslims fast. Nobody wants to do that, right? So they tell you, okay, that's too hard. So I tell you what, find something in life that you what? You feel like you're almost addicted to it. And then leave that. Fast from that one thing. So some people fast from meat. Some people fast from candy. Some people fast from watching television. And they'll call that what? Fasting. But Islam says, no, you have to fast from what? Something specific, not something of your choosing. You guys see that? So, بِإِمْسَاكٍ مَخْصُوص, a specific type of fasting, right? And what is that specific type of fasting? Al-imsak an jamil mufattirat. Fasting from everything and anything which will break what? Break the fast. Why do the scholars say anything, jamil mufattirat? Why don't they just say al-akl wa-shurb wal-jima'? Why don't they just say eating, drinking, and intimacy? Why don't they just say that? Why do they say jamil mufattirat? Because what they want to do is they want to point to the fact that it's not just food and drink and intimacy that you have to refrain from, but not just those things, but anything which is analogous to those things. You guys understand that? So they want you to understand that not only can you not eat anything, but you also can't do what? You can't basically take something into your system that will do what? Provide you with al-ghidha, with what? Nutrition. So you can't do that either, because people might do that as what? As a means to get around actually fasting. You guys understand what I mean? So they want to make the definition broad so it encompasses not just specifically food, drink, and intimacy, but also anything which is what? Analogous to those things. Does that make sense? That's why they say jamil mufattirat, everything which will break the fast. Then after that, min tulu al-fajr ila ghurub al-shams, to let you know that what is a specific time for this fasting, and it occurs from what? The crack of dawn till what? Till dusk. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So that's the definition. Any questions about that? Any questions about the definition? Let's move on to the next one, the ruling of fasting. In Islam, we have 5 what we call ahkam wada'iyah. We have 5 rulings for things, 5 categories that we put things in. What are those categories? What are the categories that we put things in terms of their ruling? Who can help me with that? Ahsan. So wajib, you have to do it. Then what? What follows that? Mustahab or mandub, which means what? It's recommended, but you don't have to do it. Meaning, if you do it, you'll get a reward. If you don't do it, you won't be sinful. Number 3, mubah, permissible. Means what? If you do it, you won't get a reward for it. If you don't do it, you won't get punished for it. It's up to you, optional. Like what? Wearing leather shoes, like tying your shoes up, or not leaving them untied, right? That's just what? Permissible. طيب. ثم بعد ذلك, what comes after that? Makruh. Dislike. Means if you leave it intentionally, with the intention of what? Pleasing Allah, you'll get a reward. But if you do it, you won't be punished. And lastly, but not leastly, is what? Haram. Means what? If you leave it intentionally, you'll be rewarded. And if you do it, you'll be subject to punishment. Make sense? So we have these 5 rulings, I should say. So what ruling shall we give to fasting? And I mean fasting in Ramadan, not fasting in general. What ruling shall we give? Wajib. Ahsant. So fasting is wajib bil kitab, as indicated by the Qur'an, as indicated by the Sunnah, as indicated by the ijma', the agreement of the scholars of Islam. As for the Qur'an, we have a number of proofs. Allah says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam, O you who believe, fasting has been what? prescribed. The word kutiba, according to the scholars of Islam, means here ujiba. It's what has been required. Okay, it's mandatory, mandated upon you, imposed upon you. Also, we have the statement of Allah in which He said, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. Whoever amongst you is a resident during the month, then let him what? Let him fast. This word فَلْيَصُمْ includes what? Lam al-amr, the lamb of commanding, the lamb of imperatives. And whenever Allah commands us with something in the Quran, the original rule is that it's what? It's required. Okay? So the Quran tells us in two places right there, or gives us two indications that it's what? Required. We also have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which he said, Buni al-Islam, this is the hadith of Ibn Umar, Katib al-Bukhari Muslim. He said, Buni al-Islam ala khams. Shahadati an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammad Rasulullah. Wa iqam al-salah wa ita al-zakah. وصيام رمضان وصوم رمضان وحج البيت لمن استطاع إليه سبيلا. So he said in this hadith, he said, Islam is built upon 5. The testimony of faith, establishing regular prayer, almsgiving, fasting in Ramadan, and making pilgrimage to the house. But I don't see in this hadith, I don't see a command. And I don't see a word like required, mandated, prescribed, imposed. So how do we understand from this hadith that fasting is obligatory? Takes a little thinking. Who can think this through for us? Who can puzzle this through and tell us how this hadith indicates that fasting is what? Required. Who can do that? It can be a sister, it doesn't matter. Who knows? The hadith, Buni al-Islam ala khams. Islam is built. Tfadli ya, don't be shy. Tfadli. Islam is built upon 5. Huh?
If you remove one of the 5, then it's defective. It's not Islam. So you have to have the 5
Hey.
for the pillars to uphold Islam.
Ahsant.
One pillar falls, then Islam is,
It won't stand. Ahsant. Shuf. The Prophet said Islam is built upon what? These 5 things. It stands what? Upon these 5 things. It's supported by these 5 things. And so if something supports the deen, without it, the deen will not stand, then it must be what? Not just obligatory, but what? The most obligatory things, which is why he used that language, Buni al-Islam. Without this, you don't have Islam. You guys see that? That's why I use the language Buni al-Islam. It's even stronger than saying what? Fasting is wajib, or prayer is wajib. This is what? Buni al-Islam. Without this, you don't have what? You don't have Islam. Jazakallah khair Salim. Last but not least, we have the ijma of the scholars. And many scholars have transmitted this ijma. Among them, Ibn Qudama in his book Al-Mughni. Ibn Qudama fi Al-Mughni. All right, now we go to the next one. Any questions about that, about the ruling of fasting? Any questions? It's pretty straightforward. Let's go now to the virtues of fasting. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about fasting in general now. So fasting inside Ramadan and outside of Ramadan will have what? Will have these virtues. And in addition to this, we'll talk specifically about the virtues of what? Of Ramadan itself. So the first virtue we're going to mention regarding fasting is هو حماية تحمي صاحبه من الوقوع في فاحشة الزنا. So one of the great benefits of fasting is that it is a shield which will protect the person from falling into what? Illicit behavior. Indecent activity. Fasting does that. It helps the person avoid illicit behavior, indecent activity. And the proof for this is the hadith collected by Bukhari and Muslim on the authority of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, in which the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam, he said, Ya ma'ashar al-shabab, man istata'a minkum al-ba'a فليتزوج فإنه أغض للبصر وأحصن للفرج ومن لم يستطع فعليه بالصوم فإنه له وجاء. He said in this hadith, O assembly of young men, O gathering of young people, whoever amongst you has the financial ability to get married, then let him do so. for this will enable him to lower his gaze and guard his chastity. And whoever amongst you is unable to get married, then let him what? Fast. Let him take to fasting. Because that will do what? It will protect and safeguard his chastity. It will protect him. It will be a shield between him what? And indecent activity. It will break and blunt the sharpness of his desire. طيب. The next virtue of fasting is as-sawm wiqayatun min an-nar. Fasting is something which will protect a person and prevent a person from the hellfire. It will shield a person from the hellfire. And the proof for this is another hadith collected by Bukhari and Muslim, this time on authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَا مِنْ عَبْدٍ يَصُومُ يَوْمًا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا بَعَدَ اللَّهُ بِذَلِكَ الْيَوْمِ وَجْهَهُ عَنِ النَّارِ سَبَعِينَ خَرِيفًا. In this hadith, the Prophet said, there is not a single person, servant of Allah, who fasts a day in the way of Allah, except that Allah will place a distance between his face and the hellfire, the like of 70 years. 70 years between his face and the fire for what? One day in the way of Allah. One day of fasting. And we also have the hadith of Abu Hurairah, in which the Prophet said, as-sawmu junnah min an-nar. Fasting is what? A shield from the fire. It's a shield from the fire. The third virtue of fasting that we'll mention is as-sawm sababun lidukhul al-jannah. Fasting not only will it protect you from the hellfire, but it's also what? A means, one of those subul, one of those pathways and methods and means to get to paradise. So we're always looking for what? We're always looking for what? The means to get to paradise. And we want to combine as many means, employ as many means as possible, so that if this one doesn't get us there, this one will get us there. Well, one of those means is what? Being regular in fasting. Al-Bukhari and Muslim again, on the authority of Sahl ibn Sa'ad as-Sa'idi. And the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, إِنَّ فِي الْجَنَّةِ بَابًا يُقال لَهُ الرَّيَّانِ يَدْخُلُ مِنْهُ الصَّائِمُونَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ لا يدخل منه أحد غيرهم يقال لهم أين الصائمون فيقومون ولا يدخل منه أحد غيرهم فإذا دخلوا أغلق وَلَمْ يَدْخُلْ مِنْهُ أَحَدٍ. In this hadith, the Prophet said, indeed, there is a door or a gate from the gates of paradise which is called Ar-Rayyan. Wa alaikum as-salam. It is called Ar-Rayyan. The fasting people specifically will enter through this door. And no one will enter through this door except the people who what? Were in the habit of fasting. It will be said on that day, where are the people who fasted? And they will stand up on cue. And they will enter through this door. And then it will be shut and locked. And no one will enter through it after they have entered through it. So far we mentioned how many virtues? 3. What was the first one? Shield from what? Illicit activity or indecent behavior. Number 2, from the hellfire. Ahsant. Number 3, pathway to what? To paradise. Ahsant. Jazakallah khair, ya Shaykh. طيب. Number 4, as-sawmu afdal al-a'mal. As-sawmu afdal al-a'mal. It's the best of deeds. Fasting is what? The best of deeds. This hadith was collected on the authority of collected by Nasa'i on the authority of Abi Umama, that the Prophet ﷺ was asked, or Abu Umama himself, he asked the Prophet, he said, Ayyul amali afdal. What deed is the best deed? So the Prophet said, عليك بالصوم فإنه لا عدل له. He said, take to fasting because nothing is like it. Nothing can compare to it. Abi Umama. In another version of the hadith, a man came and he said, Dullani ala amal, or murni bi amal. He said, direct me to a deed or command me to do something that will get me to paradise. And the Prophet said, alayka bis-sawm. He said, take to fasting. The Prophet said, murni. The person said, murni bi amal. He said, come on, tell me something to do. That's it. Give me something better than that. The Prophet said, alayka bis-sawm fa innahu la idda lahu. He said, take to fasting, trust me, because nothing can what? Compare to it. Now, I remember mentioning this hadith, so I'll mention this fa'ida real quick at tanbih. I mentioned this hadith in one sitting like this, and a brother objected. And he said, no, fasting isn't the best deed. He said, because we have those hadith where the Prophet said the first thing a person will be asked on the Day of Judgment is what? Is prayer. Okay? And if the prayer is right, then all of his other deeds will be what? Will be right. So, I don't know about you guys, but me, I didn't see a contradiction. I really didn't see a contradiction, but I'm one of those people, I'm not about confrontation at all. So I said, okay, jazakallah khair, ya akhi. We'll have to look and see how the scholars reconcile between these two hadith. Because I don't like confrontation. I don't know, some people, they just like to object, I guess. So he said that somehow there's a contradiction in what you said, that fasting is the best deed. This is not right. I didn't say it. Rasulullah said it. The Messenger of Allah said it. I didn't say it. I'm just conveying it. I'm just transmitting, conveying what the Prophet said. That's first of all. Second of all, is there any contradiction between one thing being the best deed and another deed being the first one you're asked about? Any contradiction? Any contradiction between the first deed you're asked about and the best deed? Any contradiction? No contradiction whatsoever. This deed can be the first deed you're asked about. This deed could be what? The best deed. Okay? Also, we have the hadith, and we're going to mention this shortly. We have the hadith which indicates that what? There's something special about fasting, and that's why the Prophet said, La illahu. There's nothing like it. And we're going to come to that. That you get a special thawab, special reward for fasting that what? That you don't get for any other deed. That the scale of weighing fasting is what? It's a different scale. So that tells you that what? Fasting is what? A tremendous deed. And at the end of the day, who's going to determine who gets what for what? Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay? But there's no harm in us saying that what? Fasting is the best deed because the Messenger of Allah said it. And there's no contradiction between that and the fact that prayer is the first deed you'll be asked about. طيب. Then بعد ذلك, I'm going to mention now the next fadl, which will confirm what the Prophet said in the hadith of Abu Umama. That the person who fasts will receive a great reward. The amount of it, the extent of it is only known to Allah. Another indication of what? The great virtue of what fasting. This hadith was talked by Muslim. Al-Bukhari and Muslim on authority of Abu Hurairah. This is the hadith where the Prophet said, كل عمل ابن آدم يضاعف الحسنة عشر أمثالها إلى 700 ضعف. قال الله عز وجل إلا الصوم فإنه لي وأنا أجزي به. يدع شهوته وطعامه من أجلي للصائم فرحتان. فرحة عند فطري وفرحة عند لقاء ربه. ولا خلوف فيه أطيب عند الله من ريح المسك. In this hadith, the Prophet, he said, every act of worship that the son of Adam performs, he gets rewarded for it. And then that reward he gets multiplied up to 10 times. Then it is multiplied again. And that process of multiplication can continue until he reaches what? 700 times. That he might do an act of worship, one deed, and then be rewarded for it 700 times its value. You guys see that? Then the Prophet said, Allah said, إِلَّا الصَّوْمِ, except fasting. فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. Because fasting is for me, and so I'm going to give what? A special reward for it. A special reward known only to who? Allah. The limit of it is only known to Allah and could differ from what? From one person to another person based upon their sincerity. No head, no limit. I know what this reward is, and no one else knows what I will give for what? Fasting, because it is for me. يَدْعُ شَهْوَتَهُ وَطَعَامَهُ مِنْ أَجْلِي. He leaves off what? His desires and his food and drink, his sustenance, for my sake. لِلصَّائِمِ فَرْحَتَانِ. The fasting person will rejoice twice. Farhatan in the fitri. He will rejoice when he breaks his fast daily. And wallahi, fast 16, 18 hours. And then you're able to put a cup to your mouth or put, trust me, you rejoice. You rejoice. You guys remember those old commercials? Toyota. You rejoice. So definitely people rejoice when they break their fast after 16 or 18 hours of fasting. طيب. وَفَرْحَةً عِنْدَ لِقَاءِ رَبِّهِ. And he will also rejoice when he what? When he meets his Lord. He will not be disappointed. He will not be sad. Then he says, وَلَخَلُوفُ فِيهِ أَطْيَبْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ رِيحِ الْمِسْكِ. And also what? The smell that it comes out of his mouth because of the emptiness of his stomach is better in the sight of Allah than what? Than the smell of musk. Okay, the most beautiful of what? Of fragrances. So this hadith itself has what? Many fada'il. It mentions many fada'il, many virtues of fasting, but it also does what? It buttresses and supports the previous hadith, which says what? That there's nothing compared. Nothing can compare to what? To fasting. طيب ثم بعد ذلك, the last fadl, the last virtue that we mentioned is as-siyam يشفع للصائم يوم القيامة. Fasting will intercede for the one who fasted on the day of resurrection. Fasting will intercede. As you guys know, the day of judgment will be a day when people will be, they'll be very desperate. They'll experience a great deal of anxiety. Fear will grip them because there's only two groups that day. فَرِيقٌ فِي الْجَنَّةِ وَفَرِيقٌ فِي السَّعِيرِ. A group in paradise and a group in hellfire. And people won't know where they'll be going. And people will fear that they have not done enough to entitle themselves to Allah's mercy and into paradise. So everybody will be looking for what? Intercessor. Someone to intercede. Someone who can do what? Who can just basically push me closer in the direction of what? The paradise. And so it's good, ya ikhwan, to know that there are certain deeds that we do that will intercede. If we need help, they'll intercede. It's not a wali, it's not a saint, it's not somebody in this world that we try to get on their good side so that they'll intercede. No. It's what? These deeds. These deeds we do have that potential to what? To intercede. That's what we need to be concerning ourselves with. Not with what? A wali or a saint. But we need to concern ourselves with these deeds which have the potential, according to Allah and His Messenger, of what? Of interceding. And one of those deeds is the deed of fasting. As we find the hadith collected by Ahmad wal Hakim from Abdullah ibn Umar. And this hadith, Hassanahu, it was declared sound by Ali al-Halabi and Salim al-Hilali in the book that they compiled on fasting. And the hadith, it says, الصيام والقرآن يشفعان يوم القيامة للعبد يقول الصيام أي رب منعته الطعام والشهوات بالنهار فشفعني فيه ويقول القرآن منعته النوم بالليل فشفعني فيه قال فيشفعان. So in this hadith, the Prophet said that on the day of judgment, fasting and the Quran will come and they will intercede on behalf of the slave, the servant, the one who worshipped Allah. And fasting will say, "O Allah, I prevented him from his desires and from his food and drink during the daylight hours of Ramadan. So accept my shafa'ah, my intercession." And the Quran will come and say, I prohibited him, I prevented him from what? From sleeping at night, because he what? He would stand up and recite me, right? In his tahajjud, in his night prayer. So accept my intercession. And Allah will do what? Allow them to intercede. So these are 6 virtues, and if you count the previous hadith, you can count even more. 6 virtues of fasting, whether in Ramadan or outside Ramadan. Let's recap. What's the first virtue we said? That's the first virtue? It's a shield from what? Indecent and illicit behavior, right? Number 2, shield from the hellfire. Number 3, pathway to paradise. Number 4, the best deed, la ilaha illahu. And there's no contradiction between that and what? The first deed you'll be asked about. Number 5, there is no, the reward you get for fasting, there's no comparison to the reward you receive. And then finally, fasting will do what? It will intercede. It will intercede on the Day of Judgment. Any questions about the fada'il? Any questions about the virtues? Tafadhal, Shaykh. Huh? Forgiveness of sin. Man sama Ramadan, iman wa ihtisaban. The problem with that is specific to Ramadan. And we wanted something that was what? General. Remember we said the first ones we mentioned are just general for fasting in general. Then we come specifically to what? Fasting Ramadan. Got it? Make sense? Okay. So we're done with that one. Done with virtues of what? Fasting in general. Let's go now to the virtues of Ramadan. The virtues of Ramadan. The month that our visitor, who will be visiting us in about 10 days or so. Okay? The first virtue of Ramadan is it is Shahr al-Qur'an. It is the month of the Qur'an. And we're going to talk about this in detail tomorrow. About the Qur'an being the month, Ramadan being the month of the Qur'an. And the proof for this is the statement of Allah, Shahr Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Qur'an. The month of Ramadan in which the Qur'an was what? Was revealed. So the Qur'an is supposed to have special inayah. We're supposed to pay special attention to the Qur'an in Ramadan. The Qur'an and fasting, they go what? They go hand in hand, right? They're 2 things that we have to give a great deal of inayah, pay special attention to what? The Qur'an in Ramadan. But the next virtue of Ramadan is that in Ramadan, the doors of paradise are what? Flung open on their hinges. Futihat abwab al-Jannah. Wa ughliqat abwab an-nar. And the doors of hellfire are locked shut. وَسُفِّدَتْ الشَّيَاطِينَ. And those rebellious and mischievous, those strong and very active devils are what? Are chained, shackled, and bound. And that makes it easier for us to do what? To do good deeds, right? Because we don't have those mischievous shayateen, basically trying to convince us and coerce us to what? To do evil. This is supported by the hadith collected by Muslim on the authority of Abu Hurairah and collected by At-Tirmidhi on the authority At-Tirmidhi ibn Majah as well on the authority of Abu Hurairah. So Muslim, At-Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah on the authority of Abu Hurairah. But the hadith, the wording of At-Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah is what? It's more specific. So we're going to take that wording. That wording says that the Prophet said, إذا كان أول ليلة من شهر رمضان سفدت الشياطين ومرضت الجن وغلقت أبواب النار فلم يفتح منها باب وفتحت أبواب الجنة فلم يغلق منها باب وينادي مناد يا باغي الخير أقبل ويا باغي الشر أقصر ولله أتقاء من النار وذلك في كل ليلة. In this hadith, the Prophet said that from the first night of Ramadan, the doors of paradise are what? Flung open. So no door from the doors of paradise is what? Is left shut. And the shayateen are bound, shackled, and chained. And the doors of hellfire are shut and not a single one is left open. And a crier proclaims, Ya baghi al-khair aqbil. Oh, you who desires good, aqbil, come forward. You will find what? The road, the avenue open for what? For khair. Wa ya baghi al-shar, and oh, you who desires evil, aqsir, get back. And you'll find what? Those who will do what? Who will prevent you from your evil. وَلِلَّهِ وَتَقَى وَذَلِكَ فِي كُلِّ لَيْلَةٍ. And Allah has necks that He will free from the fire. And that is what? Every night in Ramadan. May Allah make us from those whose necks are freed from the fire in Ramadan. So we need to be actively seeking this though in Ramadan. We have to have that what? Nasba ayunina. We have to have that right in front of us that what? I want to be from the people who on this night, Allah will free them from the hellfire. Another virtue of Ramadan is what? In it we find a very important night. What night is that? Laylat al-Qadr, the night, what they call the night of decree. As Allah says, and there's something special about this night in which He says, Laylat al-Qadri khayrun min alfi shahr. He says, the night of decree is better than 1,000 months. Meaning what? The worship you do in that night is better than similar worship done over what? A period of what? 1,000 nights. So there's a very virtuous night. And that occurs when? In Ramadan, showing you the virtue of Ramadan. So we mentioned 3. We can add to it. The virtue of the forgiveness of what? The forgiveness of sins. Man sama Ramadan iman wa ihtisaban ghufir lahu ma taqaddama min dhanbi, as mentioned by Yunus. So Yunus, he said that one of the virtues is what? The forgiveness of sins. The Prophet did say in the hadith, he said, whoever fasts the month of Ramadan out of faith and seeking Allah's reward, all of his previous sins will be forgiven. غُفِرْ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ. All of his previous sins will be forgiven. And that refers to what? The previous minor sins, not the major sins. Major sins require a tawbah bil ijma'. طيب. All right, so far we've covered definition, ruling, virtues of fasting, virtues of Ramadan. It's about half of the introduction. Do you guys need a break? Do you need a break? Okay. Any other questions so far? Any other questions? Okay, so what do you want to do, Ahmed? You want to give him a little break, 10 minutes? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll resume with the prerequisites of obligation. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد.